As Barack Obama said, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And change is what the Prabha Khaitan Foundation seeks to make in the lives of women by empowering and motivating them through various literary and cultural undertakings. The foundation works across nearly 30 countries all over the world, curating sessions, initiatives, and various other activities that seek to make a difference to society and lives. The Right Circle is one such platform that enables English literateurs to engage in an informal, enrapturing conversation with like-minded word lovers. The new normal, too, has called for major changes as we adjust and adapt to the challenges thrown at us due to the pandemic. The foundation has promptly gone on to reformat all its sessions to go virtual, allowing patrons to tune in from the sanctity of their homes and not miss out on any of their favorite sessions. Today, we are indeed privileged to have with us Honorable Union Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, Civil Aviation, and Minister of State for Commerce, Industry, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri. He has had a distinguished 4-decade career in diplomacy spanning the bilateral and multilateral arena, having held ambassadorial posts in London, Brazil, and as India's permanent representative to the United Nations in both Geneva from 2002 to 2005 and New York from 2009 to 2013. He is one of the few Indians to preside over the United Nations Security Council and the only one to have chaired its Counter-Terrorism Committee. He served as chairman, RIS, as vice president at the International Peace Institute, and as secretary general of the Independent Commission on Multilateralism in New York. Sir is the author of 3 acclaimed books, Separating the Wheat from the Chaff, Decoding Dominant Narratives, Delusional Politics and Perilous Interventions, the Security Council and the Politics of Chaos. Navigating us through the conversation today, we have with us noted author and former Indian diplomat, Dr. T.C.A. Raghavan. Dr. Raghavan is the author of Attendant Lords, Behram Khan and Abdur Rahim, Courtiers and Poets in Mughal India, and was awarded the Muhammad Habib Prize for Medieval Indian History by the Indian History Congress. His second book is The People Next Door, The Curious History of India's Relations with Pakistan. Without much ado, it is over to Dr. Raghavan to bring forth the wordsmith and his world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. And it's a great pleasure and honor for me to be conversing with Shri Hardeep Singh Puri today. So thank you very much, Prabha Khaitan Foundation and the Right Circle. I can't resist the temptation of adding to the introduction you gave to Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, but really he is part of that very long and distinguished tradition of persons in public life in Indian politics, but who have also intervened decisively in the major intellectual debates of our times. And both his books, which were referred to earlier, the first one about the UN Security Council, and the second one, which is this one, Delusional Politics, are really interventions in the major intellectual debates of our times. So Minister, thank you very much for your presence here today. You hold 3 critically important portfolios, 2 of them as independent charges. And may I begin by asking you a little bit about the challenges you face in the discharge of your responsibilities in these portfolios, and in particular, as we enter possibly what will be the post-COVID phase of Indian contemporary history. What do you see are the challenges going ahead in each of these three major assignments which you currently hold?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Before I attempt to answer your question, which covers a very wide canvas, let me say two things. One, that it has been a privilege for me to have enjoyed the hospitality of this foundation. I have participated in its activities. I have had the benefit of having at least one of my books, hosted, and in a sense given me the possibility of reaching out in Jaipur and Udaipur. I remember also I participated in one of the foundation's activities in Calcutta some time ago. So let me start by placing on record my gratitude for this invitation today, which is taking place in a virtual format as against a physical contact on earlier occasions. And I want to compliment them for the work which they selflessly do to promote new authors, to encourage discussions of the kind that we will have today. And I want to thank you, Ambassador Raghavan, for agreeing to be my sparring partner today. You mentioned something about intervening in the intellectual debates of our time. And I can tell you that there's nothing more exciting than, getting a few bruises in those debates. And I've enjoyed each one of them. More on my first book, Perilous Interventions, because the use of force, and particularly military force, looks very attractive to some of our colleagues who believe in the doctrine that you can reorder societies from inside by using military force from outside. And we see the results, the shambles that some of the countries where the use of force was countenanced, with or without Security Council authorization, Libya, Syria, and I could go on. But before we get into this discussion and I answer the question, I seek your forgiveness. Today we've lost two very prominent and I would say outstanding figures whose contribution to the world of diplomacy, to foreign and security policy, I think will be enshrined in letters of gold. I mean Ambassador Bajpai, Shankar Bajpai. I've just had a chance to put out a small personal tribute to him. You've served in Islamabad. Lakshmi tells me she was the desk officer on the Pak division then. He used to be called the Great Mughal whilst he was serving in Islamabad. I mean, he was a man who served with outstanding distinction in both Islamabad, in Washington, when at a very important juncture in the evolution of our relationship. His contribution to Sikkim, I think, is the stuff of which legends are made, and its legacy. So we've lost Ambassador Bajpai. I knew he was not well for a while. I was personally in touch with him, and it's a deep loss for all of us. And I just got the information that former President Pranab Mukherjee passed away, and he was your and my external affairs minister. I worked with him when he was commerce minister. And again, if you look at the evolution of India's diplomacy, what we've been through in the last many decades, I think, Ambassador, you will agree that Shri Pranab Mukherjee, I can tell you, when he was external affairs minister and I was secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Secretary Economic Relations, he was heading something like 15 or 20 GOMs. And I used to know because I, was trying to deal with only a few of them. So he was a man whose contribution to public life was huge. And Ambassador Bajpai was one of us. So I'm deeply saddened by this loss. But now let me put that behind us and try and answer your questions. Ambassador, the three portfolios that I have, at least two of them, they are, at least all three, I would say, they are, I think, in many respects, they have a role to play. They have a contribution to make, both in the context of the new India, which the Prime Minister, whose vision the Prime Minister has outlined, but more so in the context of COVID and the struggle and the challenge posed by this pandemic. When you're dealing with a virus like COVID-19, we need to distinguish between this and other viruses. I don't think any of us was around when the Spanish flu hit us, I think somewhere around 1918 in the aftermath of the First World War, because the loss of lives then was humongous. I mean, it was a devastation which only the history books record. The other viruses which we've dealt with are H1N1, swine flu, Ebola, SARS. Now, out of these, the highest mortality rate any virus had was SARS, which had a mortality rate of 17%. COVID-19 just now in India has a mortality rate only about 1.7 or 1.8%. It is lower than anywhere in the world. We could have a separate discussion on that, but that's not the purpose. But the numbers, the contagion effect, the spread is such that it has brought economic activity either to a standstill or to create recessionary conditions, not only in India, but in most countries of the world. Now, I don't want to go into what the economic situation is, but I just want to, before I answer your question, say that the decision to prioritize between life and livelihood is a very difficult one. If you prioritize life, then it's a no-brainer. You just shut the country down. You close all the avenues of access to the outside world, tell everybody to lock themselves in to wherever they are. And maybe that's one way of controlling the virus. Because the Prime Minister was able to take courageous steps right at the outset when news about this virus became available in sufficient measure for people to understand the enormity. Look, we are not going to discuss who's responsible, but the fact of the matter is it's called COVID-19. It had reared its ugly head already in the year 2019. We came to terms, and I think the Prime Minister deserves full credit. He was able to order a lockdown which was effective and complete very early in the day. I remember as Civil Aviation Minister, India was the first country which stopped civil aviation access to China. We started screening passengers coming in at all our international airports. We stopped flights from Iran and the other hotspots. Was that enough? Well, those are strong measures taken. And I think today, our overall figures show that, the figures of new cases are very high. But don't forget, our recovery rate is 80%. Our mortality rate is barely 1.7, 1.8%. And if you put that in perspective, the lockdown helped us to create the necessary infrastructure, the number of beds you required for COVID, the production of PPEs, the production of ventilators, which we were not manufacturing. And today, we were a pharmacy of the world for a long time earlier because, our generic pharmaceutical products, etc. But today, we have been able to export PPEs, we've been able to export ventilators, hydroxychloroquine, paracetamol to many countries in the world, including the industrialized developed West. Now it comes the time of opening up. And I think in some respects, my two ministries, third ministry, yes, commerce and industry deals with pharmaceuticals, production of PPEs, all these things in a indirect sort of a way, although direct way also in terms of production processes. But the other two ministries are the face of opening up. Civil aviation opening up. We closed international civil aviation I think on 23rd March, we had a total lockdown. We started domestic civil aviation through Udan flights, taking, transporting medicines, essential supplies, about 1,000 tons into different parts of the country, using the Air Force, using Air India, Air Indian Express, and our private carriers. We brought 1,500 tons of medicine from outside. That was our job in the initial phases. But it became quite apparent that if we were to maintain a lockdown, as in lockdown, with no access, no mobility, our economic consequences would be that much more severe. So on 6th March, the External Affairs Minister, our friend Jaishankar ji, he spoke to the Prime Minister, and we decided there were Indian citizens stranded outside, stranded in countries. Some of them had lost their jobs in the Gulf. Some of them were people who had just, they had come out of detention. When he first discussed this with me, I asked him, I said, Jay, how many people are you looking at? And he told me, well, this was based on registration with India's missions and posts abroad. He said 190,000. I must share with you, I chuckled. I told myself, it's better that to play down this figure, because if we have the real figure of how many we have to bring back, some people might just begin to have cold feet. And my own capacity to organize an ecosystem which deals with hundreds of thousands of people to be transported in COVID conditions, where the states are not willing to accept more flights, where you have to quarantine people on arrival, where the jury was out whether air travel is safe or not. Anyway, he said 190, we started. We started on 6th May. The first phase, Ambassador, was 6th May to 13th May. We carried something like 12,600 people in the first week. Do you know what the figure is now as we are in phase 5? Something to the tune of 1.4 million, 14 lakhs. We brought back 12.5 lakhs of people under Vande Bharat flights on charters and, 1 or 2 naval platforms. And we've sent out 1.5 to 2 lakhs of people, all right? And the number goes up by 5 to 10,000 every day. If Air India and Air India Express bring back under Vande Bharat 7,000-8,000 every day, the other airlines and charters, etc., makes to bring another. So this figure is shooting up. I can say with a sense of confidence that this is the largest evacuation and repatriation mission undertaken at any point of time in human history. And the rate at which we are going till international civil aviation opens up, it is going to be, the records will be, the figure is going up. We thought when we crossed 1 million, 10 lakhs, we had, reached up. Today, that's no longer a reference point. But the important thing is we're able to do it within reasonable arrangements, social distancing inside the aircraft, at airports. We occasionally receive complaints about congestion, about some people not respecting, but those are things we have to live with. But if you compare the safety quotient of traveling by air, where the nozzle of the wind is on the top of on the ceiling, you open it, the air comes, goes through the floor, gets refiltered and comes back. If you compare it to rail travel, bus travel, travel by other surface transport, this is far safer. And I think that realization has begun to come in. Domestic civil aviation was open only on 22nd May. And we said we'll allow 33%. Let me give you a perspective. Before COVID, we were carrying something in the vicinity of 250 to 300,000 passengers per day, pre-COVID. All our airlines put together in domestic traffic. We opened on 25th May with 30,000 passengers. Yesterday or day before, we reached 112,000. So we are already past the 33% mark. It's going up earlier at 5,000, a week. I think it will go up between now and Diwali at the rate of 10,000. I'm sure that we will reach 150, 200,000 passengers per day by Diwali and maybe pre-COVID levels by the end of the year. So one of these ministries has been dealing with this COVID situation, but it is the face of unlocking. It is the face of opening up. Now I come to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Very interesting. during the course of a discussion of the kind we are having now, Ambassador, I was asked by my interlocutor, how do you see the role of your programmatic interventions, the Prime Minister's scheme, Swachh Bharat, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, etc. And I turned the question around. I said, wait a minute, what would have happened if we didn't have the sanitation campaign? I mean, today, most of India is open defecation free. But if we did not have this scheme of the Prime Minister announced in 2014, and he said, on speaking from the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th August 2014, that the best tribute we can pay to the father of the nation when we celebrate his 150th birth anniversary, 2nd October 2019, is to make India open defecation free. And we've almost accomplished it. Other than a few urban local bodies in the state of West Bengal, rest of India is open defecation free. Waste management is being done in a scientific manner. We were at 14% scientific waste management in 2014. We are at 68%. It should be 100%, but we are getting there. There is behavioral change. You know, you can build all the toilets that you want. They will end up being used as a tailor shop, as we saw in a movie, or people still think it's much healthier to go and defecate out in the field. It's a cleaner thing rather than be cooped up in a small thing. Initially, we were getting criticized. What's happening? You're building toilets, but are they clean? We stopped. We're not getting any of that anymore. Now all you're getting is you've exhausted your quota of individual household toilets, your public and community toilets. Well, make a toilet for me in my private home as well. I mean, this is the kind of talk. So it's a complete behavioral change, thinking change. You know, one of the interesting things is gender empowerment. When the Prime Minister announced his Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, he said that it was his dream that by the year 2022, every Indian citizen will have a roof above his or her head. The title will be in the name of the lady of the house. Why am I bringing in this gender empowerment? Because this foundation, which espouses gender empowerment, and I know, you and I are both married to feminists. I don't know about your daughters, but my daughters are also feminists. So I'm the only guy who said, but I'm a he for she, and I'm sure so are you. But look at the sheer dimension, the strong dimension of women's empowerment or gender empowerment in all these schemes. The 66 lakh individual household toilets and over 6 lakh community and public toilets, all these add to the dignity of the girl child, number one. And it gives, on the gender issues, safety and security. Now, if you look at the informal waste workers who have been working, look at their contribution. And we had you're a student of history like me, and you've written more about it than most people I know about. But you had satyagrahis. Now you have the swachgrahis. It was so reassuring when I went as minister to the cities in the south or in the north, northeast. You would meet these empowered women who are doing this out of love with some incentive from our side. And you have these rag pickers, waste workers, whom we call swachhagrahis. It's so heartening to see this happening. Now, under the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Urban Livelihood Mission, NULM, we've got self-help groups. And there are nearly 50 lakh urban poor women who have been organized into self-help groups. It's to see the sheer contribution that these people are making through this, the number of individuals, the beneficiaries who have benefited from micro enterprises. And I saw during COVID, these people have produced 5.5 crore face masks, 2.50 liters of sanitizers, and more than 1.5 lakh personnel protective equipment PPEs. These are my self-help groups. Don't worry about the national figures. I'm just talking about one of the schemes, what they've done. So, it is so humbling, so reassuring to find that when this pandemic strikes us, we are able to respond, utilizing our existing scheme, utilizing the goodwill, dedication and selfless manner in which these COVID warriors have come forward. I want to now fast forward quickly because as usual, as a student of history, I take a little longer in responding. Let me come to where we are going to come out of this. I have absolutely no doubt that the Atmanirbharta spirit will result in India coming out much stronger after COVID, because we are unleashing our animal spirits in terms of self-reliance, work. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we will become inward looking. I'm not suggesting. No, we will find our rightful place in the community of nations, but with confidence. I mean, things which we couldn't dream about in terms of manufacture, PPE kits, ventilators, that's only a case in point. If you look at other things also, well, some of it is a reaction to global trends. If the global supply chains are unduly dominated by a particular country and you apprehend difficulties, well, that's the genius of the Indian people. They will quickly rebound and they will quickly produce, and the results I'm seeing are really heartwarming.
Minister, thank you. And this really brings me to a point which is also present in your book, Delusional Politics, where you talk about data-driven political narratives trumping those which are fact-based, and also about we being on the at the beginnings or the dawn of a credibility crisis. Do you think COVID, the pandemic, has stretched credibility narratives in India any more than they have elsewhere in the world? Because nobody, I mean, this is a worldwide, this is a global catastrophe. Every country has had to improvise. But do you think there have been special, any particular strains on India as far as credibility is concerned?
Well, the reference in the book to data and fact-based. Look, let me start at the beginning. You and I and your other participants will forgive me if I relate more easily to Ambassador Raghavan than I do to other people. You and I are both students of empiricism, empirical verification. What is a fact? I mean, one of the earlier books I read in history, which says, what is a fact? E.H. Carr, who was not even a historian, but I think he was a Sovietologist in one of the English universities, British universities. What is a fact? A fact is that Caesar crossed the Rubicon on a particular, in a particular year and particular, time in which. But what happens to that fact? That fact doesn't tell you how many people crossed the Rubicon before that, 100,000, 100,000, or how many crossed the Rubicon after that. So you're left with the historian who has to provide a perspective on what is a fact. I think that debate has been now carried into a somewhat more dangerous terrain. And in my book, which was written because the book actually prides itself in the fact that I predicted Brexit, it would come out, because that's an example of delusional politics. Somebody took his mind, eye off the ball, didn't see which way it was spinning, and it resulted, well, in my view, into a self-goal. But that's, I'm neither the writer, I'm neither the officially designated commentator. I'm just somebody who studies situation. And then I saw Trump coming when others thought that he was a non-starter. Because if you look at the lineup of that convention, Ambassador, I remember 15, 16 people, very eminent, highly accomplished in the Republican Party, including the governor of a Western state, Jeb Bush, other people extremely well entitled to with the credentials for the job, and President Trump wins. Now, people started talking about facts, alternate facts, people started talking about alternate narrative. I think there are 2 or 3 things which people are missing out. Is that it is not the Western liberal value system into what was fact, because even that is not without value judgment. I mean, if you look at how the New York Times behaved or the other newspapers behaved, they did not want to come to terms with the fact that the Electoral College threw up the 45th president of the United States. It was Mr. Trump. He became the president. They didn't come to terms with it. Started blaming one, your good friends, the what's his name? That Indian origin American commentator. What's his name? Who lives in New York? Who runs a program on CNN? My name will come back. He started saying, but this was
Fareed Zakaria.
Fareed Zakaria. Yeah. My point is, look, everything has a context. And here we are talking about a context which is again relevant today. That trade liberalization unleashed unprecedented prosperity, without doubt. But the fact of the matter is, trade liberalization also produced winners and losers. Trade liberalization produced some very severe, very serious losers within a country. And the president was able, in the run-up to that last presidential election, to tap into that angst. Now, when that angst is fading, I'm afraid the United States is not the only place in the world where it's happening. You saw center-right governments also win elections in other places. I think we need to revisit that. I have been pretty blunt. I mean, you and I have watched the same narratives over the last several decades. But it's time for us to introspect. Was that Western liberal democratic order, was that the closest approximation to what we are dealing with? Now, when you come back and look at how this is played out, I make one distinction. That is, the delusional politician plays for the short term. That is, you decide to bite your teeth into populism, because populism will result in a short-term gain. But some of these guys are not for the short-term gain. I mean, I don't want to go into a history of this, but some of this is playing out over, I don't know whether you want to get into a discussion on what's likely to happen in the November election. It would be a fascinating discussion. And because the same objective reality which was present prior to the last election would be again available. And you and I could be having the same discussion, after November 2020 on how facts, narratives, and their data. I mean, you give me a set of data. Look, you've heard of Cambridge Analytica and people like that. I mean, data in the hands of a good political science and somebody who understands electoral processes and demography, you can play wonders with it. But I'm saying the fact of the matter is that the democracy in and of itself is now beginning to acquire the maturity, democratic system. I mean, you and I have had this thing, why not China? But that system is not open to the same kind of scrutiny. Whereas you have mature democracy, you have lower voter turnouts in places like the United Kingdom. When you have a voter turnout low, which means the satiated people who do well decide to stay at home, a lot of people with angst come out. Now, these are things which, political science and the management of election is beginning now to throw out.
That's very true. But may I go back to something which you said right at the beginning, which was about securitization of narratives. You referred to it obliquely. Do you feel public narratives in India are supportive about issues which are there in your book too? Governance, development, equity. Do you think our narratives are sufficiently supportive of those issues, or are they too obsessed with issues of security, geopolitics, terrorism, etc.? And I'm talking more about the strategic narratives and the foreign policy narratives which surround us today. And if I may, Minister, a follow-on question before you've started answering. Do you think COVID will make us think about non-traditional security more seriously, both at the national level and also at the global level?
In some respects, it's a confession which needs to be made. I spent 39 years in the Foreign Service, and I'm sure you did also, give or take a year or two. I joined in 74 and left in 2013. That makes it just short of 39 years. And I know you've also had an equally long career. And we tend to take ourselves seriously when you are a professional Foreign Service officer. Sometimes to the extent that we are accused of, when we are abroad, of things like localitis, or when we are here of thinking that foreign and security policy or the external dimension makes a difference. No, I've always been a firm advocate of the fact that you need to take into account that out of our GDP, even now 2.9 trillion, 50% is the external sector. Now, if 50% of your GDP is the external sector, then you and I become, as professional diplomats, we become relevant, more relevant than ever. But one confession I need to make to you is, when it comes to the governance internally of the country, there is absolutely no substitute for what you call security, which is non-strategic, or providing housing, providing gas cylinders, making sure that everybody has a bank account, our different yojanas, etc. Jan Dhan Yojana, let me do it. Take it the other way around. You can have overall development which is not employment generating, which makes sure your GDP goes up, but you can still be vulnerable in terms of the fact that the fruits of basic development are not reaching the people. There's a point I am accused of, I will be if I'm not careful, making once too often, and it's a point I make in the political meetings which I address in the last few days. There have been quite a few. I used to say before the 2019 elections, Ambassador, that the Bharatiya Janata Party had a membership in 2014 of 11 crore Karyakartas. Then we added more members because we undertook a membership drive. And then we used to say, and I have no hesitation repeating, we are the largest political party in the world. But the then president of the party, Bharatiya Janata Party, the present Home Minister, sat a few of us down in a discussion, and he says, I want you guys to work out what is the total number of beneficiaries or labharthis of the different programmatic interventions that the Prime Minister's schemes involve. That means how many beneficiaries are there of gas cylinders, how many beneficiaries are there of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and the other schemes. Do you know what the result was? Well before the 2019 election, I had predicted that we will get an absolute majority for a second time, and overwhelmingly. In 2014, we got 282 seats in Parliament, Lok Sabha. In the 2019 elections, Ambassador, we got 22 crore votes, which were more than the total number of members of our party. And the total number of beneficiaries of these schemes, 22 crores. Exact number of beneficiaries, 22 crore. That is the number of votes. Now, it's not my case. And I don't want to make that presentation that only if you get a Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, you will vote for us. Not at all. But there is some correlationship. If you have benefited from a development-oriented program, you are not likely to forget it. That's why an overwhelming number of women voted for us. A lot of young people voted in spite of the jobs issue, because there was a clear program which was outlined. Some parts of the country, for instance, the benefits of these programs did not reach the people. I mean, Punjab is a case in point. Out of 13 seats, Akali Dal and BJP only got 3. But there are reasons why this did not happen there. But you look at the other states where the programmatic interventions did well, glorious success. Let me give you the case of UP. And I don't remember the figures offhand. Yogi Ji's government came in, I think, sometime around March 2017. Before that, you had the Samajwadi Party government led by Akhilesh Ji. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana started in June 2015. I have seen the records of my ministry. We kept writing to them saying, please send us proposals for Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. In spite of all our efforts, look, the Honorable Vice President was the minister here then. The same secretary, same joint secretary, both UP cadre, they did their best. Total number of demand that could be generated from there was only about 18,000. In the period between June 2015 and March 2017. Now you take that same period, June 2015 to March 2000, same number of months, and you fast forward them from 2017 onwards till the election takes place here. That figure goes up from 18,000 to something like 12 lakhs. Now, if 12 lakh people are beneficiaries of a Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, how? And I'm not counting the other programmatic interventions, the development scheme. And you saw the results in UP. If I take the same figure into Punjab, I'm not establishing a coefficient, but I'm also saying that it cannot be that there is no relationship between the two. So the thing which matters. Now, to what extent, your question is more blunt, to what extent do strategic geopolitical things matter? Well, some clearly do. If you are a resident in a border district and there's a flare up or there's something security, obviously it matters because physical security is what. But then you and I also have been privy to the thinking that if you want to deal with Sri Lanka, please be careful on what happens in Tamil Nadu. If you want to deal with Nepal, see what's happening in parts of UP and Bihar. If you want to deal with Pakistan, as you know, be a little careful about what happens in Pathankot or Punjab, etc., and J&K, etc. But I think overall, those things will be always, those are sui generis. I mean, you're dealing with a particular situation. But to suggest, as I think some political parties in India did, they let their eye off that turn in the ball. And that turn in the ball, when the ball hits the pitch, it is development, development, development. So I'm very clear with my experience of the last 3 years, as against the 39 years I spent earlier and 3 years later in foreign policy related. So a total of 42 years in diplomacy, International Peace Institute, UN related independent commission, RIS. But these 3 years have taught me one thing. If you are dealing with a portfolio which has a development dimension, make sure the benefits of that get to the people. At least the narrative is understood by the people. Because if the narrative is understood by the people, you'll get resonance.
Well, there is a question which is really linked to what we were discussing earlier. And this is that, do you agree? The questioner says that he's very happy with the various programs the government has introduced for upliftment of society. But the main point is, do you agree that Indian citizens have a tendency to misinterpret the Atmanirbhar spirit, especially, and this is the point, in our patriarchal society? I would stretch the question to ask further that do we have the regulatory bandwidth to implement Atmanirbharta without going back into a kind of license permit Raj of the past?
Well, I am so happy that whoever has asked this question, I'm delighted because it gives me a chance to open up. And since this is a discussion around a book, I won't be held accountable or misquoted, because otherwise we'll play the full recording to them. Look, are we a patriarchal, not patriarchal is wrong, that's property. Are we how do you put it? Matriarchal would be property. Are we patriarchal in the sense that are we dominance of the male? 100%. Make no mistakes on it. And I keep telling people that, when you go to buy property, it's location, location, location. You want development, it's education and gender empowerment. You get that right, you'll be okay. Is there a chance of this being interpreted in terms of the license Raj and, import substitution? I mean, whoever the questioner give me his or her name. I mean, he or she is being polite. Is there a chance of it being interpreted? There are many people around us who are doing precisely that. They're misinterpreting it. This was never intended to be an inward-looking excuse to close our borders to the world. I mean, the whole discussion is about Atmanirbharta being used as a spirit, as a resolve, as a determination to make us more productive and better members of an international community. I mean, when you start issuing notifications, I just signed a file which was gone up to PUC, make the export of PPEs free, make the export of all this stuff. You're part of a global system. Now, the global supply chain from one particular source may be causing some difficulty to you. I'm not going to go into a discussion. Everybody knows that. And there may be other reasons. But the point is, why in the name of, the Lord, are you becoming so dependent on one particular source of supply? Why do you run $80 billion worth of, deficit on a trade turnover, which is just slightly higher than that? I mean, that is something you need to address, but not at all. Could it be interpreted? It's already being misinterpreted by that. Therefore, when you ask me this question, I'm delighted. It gives me an opportunity. Anything that I'm doing, let me tell you, in any of my three ministries, that's not the spirit. The spirit is to make sure you don't become a Lego or you put together, a few nuts and bolts, etc. No, there are things you won't be able to do. There are things on which, but look at our technology. You're on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, machine learning, etc. You will need to come out as leaders there. And for heaven's sake, judge us by where we land. You asked me a question, I should have answered it. In a false narrative, look at what was being said. That this pandemic is going to kill so many people, so many. Out of the total number of people who are the affected cases, the number on ventilators is less than 2%. The number on oxygen is very less. So it can be one of two things. Either we are as citizens used to, we are members of a country which has a high disease burden, and therefore not at all. We've got our act together. First, we didn't have any of this. We didn't have the hospital beds. We organized ourselves. But we also have to ensure that we are part of a larger global system. And you may have your problems with X or Y country in a particular point of time, but you're not going to insulate yourself from the global community. Atmanirbharta will resonate even more strongly because you want to take advantage of the other supply chains.
Well, Minister, we are running out of time because your office has also told me you have a meeting at 7, so we have a few more minutes. But I want to squeeze one question in, that if you were the chapter which is missing in the book, and it was not your intention to write about it, but the chapter which now appears very missing is the one on China. If you were to bring out a new edition, and which I'm sure you will at some stage when you have the time, what would you say about China and its role in the world in the years to come?
Ambassador, I'm not sure I would include China in this book, because this book is essentially about democracies. It is about three democracies, as I say somewhere in the beginning part of the book, I don't remember. It's about Britain, the United States, and India, and three countries which I know well. So my starting point, with all due modesty, I don't know China. I'm a student of China when it comes to its human rights situation, because I was ambassador to the UN in Geneva. I used to lead the Indian delegation to the Human Rights Commission. I've been a trade negotiator, so I know a little bit about what China does on the trade front. I've been in the Security Council. I've presided over it. I know what China does there. But that's not a full picture. We leave the China part to our friends Vijay Gokhale and Gautam Bambawale and others to do, or the older ones who I think have got too mesmerized by it, and they saw their own success as producing a reassuring system. I'm not going to get into that. But yes, I would like to write a book on China, but from a different perspective. Not a chapter in a new edition whenever I get the time. But the fact of the matter is, we have all singularly, you, me, and I don't know about you, but I don't want to be harsh on you. I was a trade negotiator in Geneva when the Working Party was established on China's resumption of membership to the multilateral trading system. It was during the GATT period. The GATT period was ending when the WTO was being founded. I remember, I've probably written about it also. I remember telling people that this Working Party, which is examining what China needs to do in terms of assumption of obligation as a member of the multilateral trading system, how are you viewing this? Everybody, now I'll tell you, everyone, and the distinguished representatives of the United States, European Union, They were viewing it as, and they were salivating. I'm choosing my words very carefully. They were salivating at the prospect of China providing a huge market for their manufactured products and their goods and services to go there. So they did not look at the point of what would happen if China, with its existing system, failed to assume those obligations. What do I mean by obligation? All of us, we are running a completely transparent system. If I want to, as a Minister of State for Commerce and Industry, I want to hide something which is beyond, or which is not entirely in conformity with my WTO obligation. Even if I want to do it, I can't do it. Because you guys, you commentators, you and I are also part-time commentators when we are not in office. You will write a learned article in the Economic Times or so and so. Government has taken this step. So you don't need an outsider to come and surveil you for what you do. Everything is out in the open, and then before you know, an ever alert good commercial counselor sitting in a foreign embassy in Delhi just has to pick up your news item, send it back to USTR, and you will get notice for consultation. Can you do that in China? Look, the hardcore of trade in dealing with a country like China comes in on what I call sales below normal value. I'm not making an accusation. I'm just saying dumping. I do not know, and I don't think most trade experts know, where state subsidization, which is a charge on the government exchequer, where that ends and a charge on which is sale below normal value, dumping begin. Now, the working party should have been much more rigorous in terms of those disciplines. The first thing I would look at if I were to write a book on China is how China came in as an outsider in the multilateral trading system, got its membership, utilized its rules, and today is happily running trade surpluses with a number of countries. I'm not saying trade surpluses are per se bad. I'm running trade surpluses with a few countries where I would like to balance trade. But that's something that needs to be understood. Secondly, and this is where you and I probably have a lot to discuss, tell me seriously, the whole system was anchored in the rule of law. Okay? When there was a ruling by an international body on the South China Sea, how many other countries in the world could just turn around and say, we don't accept the findings? Look, don't misunderstand me. They may be totally right. I think we need to learn also on another front that there has been the phenomenal rise of some countries, and China is a case in point. Have we been able to factor that in to our calculus for determining our relationships, etc.? So I think any book that I would write on China, I mean, I'm loath to attempting something I know nothing about. Trade policy, I know something. International security architecture, I know a little bit about. So I would look at it from that point of view.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for your time. And as I'm sure all of you would have noticed, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, whatever else he may be accused of, he can't be accused of not speaking his mind. He belongs, as I said, to this long tradition of intellectuals who take part in politics and active public life, and therefore it is a matter of great gratification for all of us to have had him with us today. Thank you very much again, and I will now hand over to the Prabha Khaitan Foundation and thank them again for organizing this discussion.